Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. So, the term, hashtag, whatever, currently trending right now is I feel sorry for Americans. And this is apparently in relation to a New York Times piece titled, I Feel Sorry for Americans. A Baffled World Watches the US. From Myanmar to Canada, people are asking, how did a superpower allow itself to be felled by a virus? And why won't the president commit to a peaceful transition of power? You're the New York effing Times. You're supposed to be some of the best journalists that the world has to offer. And you're telling me you can't see the answer right in front of you? How did America allow itself to be felled by a virus? Because America allowed itself to drink the Kool-Aid of capitalism and enjoy the worst excesses of it. America allowed itself to be felled by a virus because the pro-life party was happy to throw hundreds of thousands of American lives under the proverbial bus. America was allowed to be felled by a virus because 40 fucking years of erasure of social programs and proper government institutions and good governance in the name of the free market and privatization to find efficiencies have left the state of things so crumbling that America was one good virus away from collapsing in on itself. And you're telling me you can't just provide that answer right there, like that, verbatim in your own article? Why won't the president not concede power? I don't know, because Americans allowed themselves to vote for a selfish, self-absorbed, narcissistic hypocrite and constant liar? That's how he's always operated, and people didn't challenge that enough. And your system in America is so broken with the Electoral College. And here you are, New York Times, musing, oh, how could this have happened? Who has the answers? Has no one been paying attention? There's your answers, right there, clear as day. But because you are in a capitalist country, you can't say the actual truth behind things because your sponsors wouldn't like it. And if more Americans started to really question things, truly question things, not any of these dumb QAnon conspiracies, but to truly question the nature of their system and the two parties in charge and how much overlap there is between them and how uniquely terrifying the American Republic truly is in terms of how powerful its oligarchy is. But nope, we can't talk about that because that same oligarchy pays your bills. This is so frustrating to see what's supposed to be leading edge journalism have to ask rhetorical questions like, oh, how could it have gotten this way? When everyone should know the answer. It started with Reagan and neoliberalism and the privatization of everything. It started with this ideological war that began in the wake of World War II and the rise of the Cold War. It started with Americans becoming increasingly obsessed with their own talking points and bubbles and becoming more and more internalized and not recognizing that empathy is a good thing to have for your fellow man, even if you don't know them and they're a stranger to you. It began when businesses began to take over more and more of society and began to have more and more influence in government positions. It began when warfare became a profitable industry. It began when no one decided to challenge this because the alternative, communism, was too scary a prospect back when the Soviet Union was still a thing. It is so frustrating to see mistake after mistake that people should logically be able to connect the dots. And yet people are wondering, how could this happen? Because Americans have systematically, for decades, been pushed to increasing extremes, both politically and financially. And by feeling these pressures, they want to lash out. But because all the media they're consuming, whether they're on the left or the right, still doesn't address the root cause of the problem, which is the capitalist system, they instead find other reasons to point fingers and point blame. It's immigrants. It's people being too offended by anything. By the way, cancel culture isn't a thing. Everyone wants to find some easy fall guy or believe in some giant conspiracy to explain why things are the way they are. And existence and society are never that simple. And I know that there's probably someone out there watching this saying, oh, well, you're just blaming everything on capitalism. Isn't that a gross simplification? And to a certain extent, yes. Because when I talk about capitalism, I talk about the entirety of that system in its complexity. Because I can't say, to sum up, very quickly, the exploitation of cheap labor overseas, which results in the extraction of paid meaningful labor in the West, which means that there's less unionization and less money and protections that mean a diminishing middle class that ultimately results in a greater extraction of wealth towards the top part of society that then allows them to buy up more of other things like businesses, which is why everyone only shops at Target and Walmart. That's why your mom and pop stores have disappeared, and why they're buying and investing in things like Big Pharma, data, and all these other big players that are influencing your political parties, whether they're Democrat or Republican. Like, it would just keep going. So I can't say a 5-minute spiel when I can just use the shorthand of capitalism is the problem. And I hate that people like the New York Times have to keep asking these rhetorical questions of how did we get here, when the answer is simple, but they're not allowed to say the actual answer because that wouldn't do proper justice. Just quickly scrolling through this article, it's like watching the decline of the Roman Empire. Yeah, because the Roman Empire had an issue where the wealthy just kept hoarding money, and it was far more difficult for your average Roman citizen to keep Rome great, as it were. Gee, I wonder where we've seen this and are currently seeing it. Why won't the president surrender power? Because he's a power-obsessed narcissist, and he constantly needs self-validation. Which is why if he ever loses, it's not his fault. It's the Democrats. It's illegal voting. It's the mail-in ballots. It's the deep state. It's whatever boogeyman he wants to make sure that he can avoid doing any kind of self-reflection and realizing that he has work to do as a human being. It's really unfortunate to see. And to hear people say, I feel sorry for Americans, and we're in 2020 is just so sad. Because I have American friends and family, and many of them are understandably scared, tired, exhausted, and frustrated with the situation. And it's very privileged on my part to be able to sit here from afar outside of that system and rant and rail against it and say, well, thank God I'm not them. But I feel for them. And I hate that all these people, whether they're my friends, my family, your average working stiff in America, everyone keeps asking themselves, how did we get to this point? The answers are right there. Just please open your eyes and see them. But the fact that people aren't or can't because of the media and propaganda that they consume, and they're afraid of alternatives because they haven't known anything else thanks to the oligarchy that runs America. All of this and more is ultimately what's bothering me today.